We're alive. I'm not really sure. I'm not getting feedback from the. Okay, yeah. All right. So I am live. All right, great. Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Tech Talk Q&A. This is the show where I talk about the various news of the last week and explain to you what it means, at least from my perspective. Anyway, we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff. But before I do, please pound that like button and click subscribe if you haven't. It's a way to give me a sense of how much you guys like this content and whether or not I should continue. Anyway, let's take a look at this, but we'll wait just a couple of more minutes as a way. Well, actually, you know what? Let's just get started. What the heck? All right, so here's my newsletter, Bitcoin Tech Talk. It is available on to be subscribed to if you look in the show notes or if you look in the link below. Yeah, so I send this out every Monday, 9 a.m., and it's a good way to sort of catch up on the week if you're not paying attention to Bitcoin, Twitter, and so on. Anyway, this week's theme, well, at least the lead article, is security is hard, right? Like it's really, really difficult. And the reason why it's difficult is because it's asymmetric by nature. That means that the defender has to defend against all possible attack, but the attacker can just find one vulnerability and use that to their advantage. And that tends to be very, very difficult. Anyone that's played sports knows that defense can be often very hard, especially if the offense is very good. And the thing is, like, one breach is all it takes for everything to go bad. And you know, like whenever anyone like that's kind of not been in the security space, like encounters somebody that's actually in the security space, and they ask about, you know, okay, well, how do I secure this, blah blah blah, and they give them like 1,000 pages of stuff to do. I'm not gonna do this. What the heck? That's a mistake. And the reason why it's a mistake is because security people, like, they seem paranoid to the normal person, but it's not necessarily because they're just being paranoid. It's because they have good experience. They know that, you know, like, breaches happen in the unlikeliest of places, and your best bet is to secure things as well as possible. And that's what brings us to Jameson Lopp's $5 wrench attack article. This is basically how to protect yourself against the $5 wrench attack. And if you don't know what that means, it's from this XKCD comic, Crypto Nerd's Imagination. His laptop's encrypted. Let's build $1 million cluster to crack it. No good. It's 4096-bit RSA. Blast, our evil plan has foiled what would actually happen. His laptop's encrypted. Drug him and hit him with this $5 wrench until he tells us the password. Got it. We tend to you know, think way too much about the actual, you know, $5 like the cryptography, and think that that's where we're going to get all of our security, when in fact with real security, like, the attacker is going to take the path of least resistance, and that oftentimes involves something like a $5 wrench. And that's what this article is about. This will be our long read. But essentially what I'm advocating for here, and I think what Jameson is advocating for here, is that it's gonna look like it's overboard whenever it comes to security. Like the amount of things that you end up doing, the cold wallets, the air gaps, the multiple passwords, the collaborative custody, the security in your home, and security on your person, all of that stuff is necessary if you want really good security, because all it takes is one breach for you to lose all your Bitcoins. And that is a frightening prospect, but at the same time, it's something that you need to guard against. And that's why you kind of need to be paranoid. And that paranoia in many ways is actually a good thing. All right, so let's talk through the other stuff, and then I'll do that long read. So anonymous developer ZMan SCP XJ, or Z-Man for short, has published an article on a really interesting form of CoinJoin. So this is essentially a form of a coin swap, and if you're not familiar with what a coin swap is, it's It's an idea by somebody named Adam Gibson that he gave about three years ago. Essentially, what you use is something called an adapter signature. And the special thing about an adapter signature is that when you sign with an adapter signature, you end up revealing information as part of that signature. And it's a really clever trick, but essentially you reveal something, and you're forced to reveal something in order to sign with an adapter signature. Now, if you do that, one of the things that you can reveal is just enough information so that the other side of the swap can get enough information so that they can create a transaction without the other party's permission. So you can't withhold your part of the transaction. So essentially what a coin swap is you have two transactions. So I'm going to send you money, and you will send me money. And you won't, we're basically swapping coin histories at that point. And you do this as a way to, defeat chain analysis. That way, when they go back, it's like, oh, wait, that goes back to this person, but that's not the right person, and so on. So it's kind of like pay to endpoint that we talked about last week, and that's it in that way. If you do that, you can swap histories. And if you do that with a large enough set, and you do this often enough, you get a pretty good anonymity set. It's kind of like pay to endpoint in the sense that the more you do it, the better it becomes. And the more people participate, the better it becomes. But it's a really interesting way of doing it because it's trustless. You can, with the use of adapter signatures, what you end up having is you can create your side. One side can... Once one side does it, the other side can execute their transaction without any problem. So it's a really interesting way of doing it. Now, Z-Man's particular contribution is in extending that to multiple people. So a coin swap involves exactly two parties. So Alice sends some coins to Bob. Bob sends the same amount of coins to Alice in two different transactions. So the two transactions are not linked at all, but they allow you to essentially trade coin histories. What Z-Man is proposing here is doing that with many parties. So you have like sort of like a circular dependency, and Alice swaps with Bob, who swaps with Charlie, who swaps with Danielle, and so on. And you get a large group of people doing it at the same time, and they're all swapping, but not like one for one. They're swapping in a circle, and that makes it a lot better because now like there's no easy way to link all of them. So really cool way to do it, and it's something that Z-Man mentioned in a Bitcoin Dev post that I thought was really interesting. And the only thing about it is that adapter signatures require Schnorr, and Schnorr isn't active on the Bitcoin network yet. We need Taproot to go through in order for that to happen. All right, Liquid continues to get traction. Apparently, almost 2,000 Bitcoin is basically it's what Liquid is, and essentially the reasons why you would use it. Transaction assets are being traded at all, and it's really good for exchanges, traders, and businesses, and possibly users, depending on how confidential or how big the anonymity set becomes, and so on. The nice thing is the incentives are all aligned so that there will be more people using Liquid as fees go up and so on. And at that point, the anonymity set goes up, at which point it becomes more viable to go put it into the sidechain and do some confidential transactions with it and then take it out. And that's another way in which you can get some privacy. Although, right now the anonymity set isn't that big because it's only like 2,000 Bitcoin. And if you can track those people, then you kind of can figure out who you are by process of elimination. Sideshift.ai has published a primer on integrating PayJoin or pay to endpoint. This is from Blockstream last week. They cooperated with BTC Pay as a way to essentially make it so that you have something like a coin join every time you pay, with the merchant at least. This is just a straight up like step-by-step how to do it and how to set it up. The one thing that I found out from this article, which I found interesting, was that there's some negotiation in the background that needs to happen. So what BTC Pay does is it gives you a URL to contact, and then based on that URL, you do some communication, negotiate exactly how you're going to sign this transaction, and then you sign it, and then it goes through. So really cool stuff. I think it'll be hopefully gets more used, especially for merchants that are using BTC Pay. Vlad Castilla explains why Bitcoin is more secure and more faster. So this is pretty good explainer, I think, of why it is that Bitcoin is actually more secure and better than a lot of these other coins, despite having quicker block times. Like these other things aren't as secure. One block on Bitcoin is worth like 30 blocks on Bitcoin Cash or something like that. So it ends up being way better to have even one confirmation on Bitcoin. So 6 confs is equal to 389 confs and so on. So in a sense, just saying, oh, well, it'll confirm in 5 minutes, that's kind of stupid. It's not the same level of security. One confirmation elsewhere is not the same as one confirmation on Bitcoin, is essentially what he is saying. And it's a good explainer. Encourage you to send it to people that make that argument. Lightning. All right, so this is a pretty extensive discussion that Matt Corallo and mostly Lalu have been going back and forth on. But Matt describes what the problem is here. It's basically because of this thing called RBF pinning, which is part of Lightning. So Lightning requires like a 2 of 2 multisig, and uses check sequence verify as a way to do time locks and so on. So check sequence verify makes it so that whenever that the commitment or the funding transaction goes in, and then you have a number of blocks or some amount of time until that can be spent again, something like that. So that's what check sequence verify is, and that's part of how Lightning works. The thing is, in order to mitigate certain things, they introduce something called RBF pinning, and that's or RBF carve out to take out the RBF pinning. So RBF stands for replace by fee, and essentially you can just pay more in order to replace the transaction that's in the mempool. So in order to prevent that prevent people from using that to cheat on Lightning transactions, they have something called the RBF carve out, and it's a very narrow type of transaction, but it makes it so that you can use child pays for parent as a way to get to punish the cheater, and that's what it is. Except he found like an exception to this, but you need the cooperation of a miner, and you can only steal the last transaction that you did in Lightning. But it is a vulnerability, so that's what this whole thread is about, and it's interesting because there's a lot of different aspects that go into it, a lot of incentives and game theory that the developers are thinking about. It's a very good way to learn about how developers think sort of adversarially, especially with respect to something like Lightning. economics, engineering, etc. So one of the claims that almost everybody in altcoin land, or maybe even no coin land, talks about is Tether, and how that's actually pumping up Bitcoin because they're fractionally reserving, and as a result there's way more money in crypto than there should be, and so on. Well, this study by a couple of UC Berkeley professors came to an interesting conclusion. The bottom line, we find no systematic evidence that stablecoin issuance affects cryptocurrency prices. Rather, our evidence supports alternative views, namely that stablecoin issuance endogenously responds to deviations of the secondary market rate from the peg rate, and stablecoins consistently perform a safe haven role in the digital economy. In other words, whenever it's like too volatile or going down too fast, people escape to stablecoins. That seems to be the way things are. Dan Boneh, he of Stanford, has published a newer version of his new cryptography book. So it's like still 0.5. I think the previous 4 versions were in 2017. So the newer version of this is really good in the sense that we're finally getting some more meat on these. Unfortunately, like chapter 1 isn't written yet. There's right. So it says Part 1, secret key cryptography, and then it starts with chapter 2. But it does have a lot of math symbols, and it's clearly like written in tech or something. But it is like if you want to know about security, cryptography is just something that you need to know, and how it works and all that. So if you are an engineer in this regard, this is something that you definitely need to think much more about. Citizen Bitcoin has published a Declaration of Monetary Independence. So this is from Citizen Bitcoin, and it's basically a take on the Declaration of Independence, and unanimous declaration of the decentralized nodes of Bitcoin. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for people to dissolve the monetary bands which have connected them to one another, and to assume the separate and equal station to which the laws of natural money and of human nature entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. So it's it's kind of like a cypherpunk manifesto sort of for Bitcoin, I guess. So really cool. Encourage you to read it, and sort of it's fun, right? All right, let's see. The D-Force hack of 25 million from last week. It looks like the hacker returned all of the funds. And according to this story, essentially what happened is that the hacker didn't cover up their tracks well enough. And as a result, like people were starting to figure out who the hacker was. Apparently, possibly lived in Singapore or something like that. So as a way to get some leniency from the authorities should the hacker get caught, basically the hacker returned all of the money. So I guess the lesson for hackers is if you are going to do a theft like this, make sure you cover your tracks. The fact that somebody that was this sloppy ended up stealing it just tells you all you need to know about the actual security of D-Force itself. All right, Crypto Watch has come out with a stock to flow model indicator, and this is based on Plan B's stock to flow model, and yeah, it gives you an analysis of how stock to flow goes with the current situation and so on. So it's let me see if there's a link to the actual. Yeah, so you could go to the BTC USD chart. This one's for Kraken, and what you can do then is what do you do? It says it's all right. So you do analysis and overlay. Plan B. So where's stock to flow? Stock to flow. There it is, stock to flow. Apply. And I guess these dotted lines are it, something like that. I guess hourly is probably the wrong one. Here's the weekly. Yeah, there you go. So you can see sort of like the stock to flow bands here and whether or not this is going to stay within that band. So really cool. I hope they do stuff like that more and so on. Yeah, stock to flow is definitely really interesting. So that's something to keep an eye on. All right, a Chinese EOS wallet may have locked up as much as 52 million in EOS, and basically it looks like an exit scam. 52 million in EOS. Sadly, that's not that much of EOS. It's only like I don't know, like 5% at the most, probably less than that. So yeah, essentially there's it's gone, and 890,000 EOS tokens are gone as a result of this custody service. I really don't understand why people keep things on services like that. I mean, but then again, EOS is pretty centralized, so I guess that's how it is. ICOs don't pay like they used to. ConsenSys has cut off another 10% of their workforce, which means that they still have like 1,000 people. Okay, the numbers indicate that ConsenSys may have begun the year with under 850 employees. Now it retains just over 550. That still seems really bloated to me. But I mean, that's Joe's money and he can spend it however he wants. All right, I did have a debate with Eric Voorhees. Yeah, so my internet is, I blocked those things. But I had a debate with Eric Voorhees. I did my talk, How Bitcoin Changes Incentives. And I did a couple of shows and a show with Tone Vase. Those are it for my newsletter. All right, so let's take a look at my Twitter feed and let's go to that part of the show where I explain some of my tweets. All right. All right, so that was it. All right. Read this thread. This is what tyranny looks like. The free things from the government require compliance as payment. In other words, it's a forced exchange, not a free gift. Free as a trap. So basically, A.G. Stover said, have seen a lot of progressives on here suggesting that any protesters who get COVID-19 should be refused treatment. Just in case you were wondering whether or not human rights under their regimes will apply to those who aren't with the program. So in other words, if you are somebody that's saying, well, okay, if you protest, then you don't get healthcare. Yeah, that's exactly what every communist party has done. And this is why free healthcare isn't really free. It requires you to comply. It's not a natural human right or anything, because they'll take it away from you the moment they don't that you are doing something that they don't like. And this is the perniciousness of any sort of state-sponsored free thing, is that you have to comply in every way with the state in order to receive that said benefit. And this is true of free education, free healthcare, free anything. And this is why free markets are much better. And paying for things is in many ways much better, because it's an exchange for something, for money for your labor instead of your compliance, and instead of your willingness to go along with the program or to follow a leader and so on. Bitcoin is a survival game. One wrong turn into altcoin land or ICO land will destroy your wallet, your soul, or both. Bitcoin apostates if you've been deceived by BCH, ETH, BSV, or something else greedy or stupid. You can come back. Redemption will always be permissionless. So, believe it or not, this is a positive tweet. I'm just saying, like, if you're lost out there in altcoin land or no coin land or any other land than Bitcoin, you can always come back. You can always come back to Bitcoin, and you don't need to ask anybody's permission. And that's the beauty of being in Bitcoin, is that nobody needs to know, and you can be a part of the Bitcoin community without anyone having any idea. And redemption will always be permissionless. I'm thankful for Bitcoin because it's opening up people's eyes to the monetary world order around them. It's changing up the corrupt and autocratic dollar hegemony. It's exposing modern day false prophets, state-sponsored economists for what they are. Why are you thankful? So, essentially the monetary world order is being more and more seen. It's an autocratic dollar hegemony, and it's not something that a lot of people have recognized. It's a lot of people are under the illusion that we're under a democracy in many ways, and to some degree we are, but monetarily, economically, we definitely are not. It's controlled by the Fed, controlled by like some combination of banks and government, which is what the Fed is. And of course, state-sponsored economists are very complicit in this regard. They're the ones that are, justifying all of the money printing and so on. Death, taxes, the second law, thermodynamics, and 21 million. What do these have in common? They're certain. So, that was the point of the tweet. Bitcoin is destroying capital controls. It's coming for crony capitalism next. So right now, if you have money in Argentina or something, you can still get out of the Argentinian peso by transferring to Bitcoin. You don't need to use official banks or anything like that. And black market dollars have always sort of done that to some degree, but it was always kind of hard to get. With Bitcoin, it's permissionless, so it makes it a lot easier. So capital controls is one of the three pillars of any central bank, as a to control capital flows requires capital controls, but that's being taken away from them. The only two other things that they have are keeping a peg to the dollar, which they kind of have to do, and their independent monetary policy, which is kind of being taken away because the other part has to be there. So, it's in a sense, the fact that Bitcoin is destroying capital controls means that central banks, other than the US, are losing their ability to sort of print money so easily. And it's already doing some good in that way. I suspect that crony capitalism will also be something that it will start to destroy, because they'll, you can't print willy-nilly anymore, right? Like you can't, you have to be a little more price sensitive. So that seems to be something. I wanted some feedback, so some good suggestions. Regulation can turn assets into liabilities and vice versa. It's the essence of authorities picking winners and losers. That is for assets that are easily regulatable. This was on the day that oil went negative. Essentially, the reason why it's negative is because there's a lot of regulation around it. So there are costs to taking delivery, and you can't just take delivery in your backyard. The contract says you already have to take delivery in like some oil well and or oil repo in Oklahoma or something. So that's why it went negative. So it turned an asset into a liability, and it can do the reverse as well. So that is what regulation does. Is it picks winners and losers, and it does that for all sorts of things. There's a reason why you can't store oil in your backyard. There's all sorts of regulations about that, and you have to, if you want to store oil somewhere, you have to comply with a lot of regulations in order to do it. All physical possessions can be taken away by force. All centralized digital possessions can be taken away by decree. Bitcoin is unique in that no one can take it away without your permission. Bitcoin is perhaps the first scarce thing in the world we can say we truly possess. So it's Bitcoin is very different in the sense that it's metaphysical, and you don't have to reveal the private key if you don't want to. They might torture you, they might do whatever. But if you really don't want to give it up, you don't have to. With something like gold, if you possess it, it can take it away. With something like gold, if you buried it somewhere, I guess you can make it so that neither of you gets it, but somebody can eventually find it. So Bitcoin is something that we truly possess, and it's very different than a lot of other things in the world. And that was the point of the tweet. Reality rewards those who take care of the resources entrusted to them. Fiat money reverses this and entrusts more resources to those who do a terrible job taking care of that which was entrusted to them, causing misaligned incentives. Bitcoin aligns better with reality. So, we're seeing zombie companies getting money. We're seeing bailouts and things like that. Those are people and companies that haven't done a very good job saving or planning or whatever. So, they're getting more money. They're gonna squander more of it. It's the opposite of what capitalism does, which is put money towards people that have proven that they're good with it. And that's Bitcoin aligns better with reality in that sense, in that it rewards those people that take care of the money better. The only reason the corporate welfare state can exist is because of fiat money, and fiat money has always been and always will be autocratic. Bitcoin is our hope in a better system. So there's a lot of welfare, corporate welfare. Basically they're all buying votes and doing crony capitalism. Fiat money enables that, and it's in many ways just horribly, horribly unfair. And Bitcoin is our hope in a much more fair system. Until 2008, we didn't know if anything could be decentralized, digital, and scarce at the same time. Bitcoin is a truly profound invention and an innovation on par with the wheel and the steam engine. And I really believe this. It's something that's very different than what existed before, kind of like the wheel and the steam engine, and it allows for things that we didn't know could exist. The fact that we can secure our wealth in our head is absolutely mind-boggling. And that's the innovation, and that's what the last 12 years have brought and sort of sparked here. The stock market has taken on characteristics of money because it's a much better store of value than the US dollar. Right now, the stock market is going up while all these people are suffering. So what the hell is going on? The answer is that the stock market is not a reflection of the real economy. It has a store of value premium because people know that there's a lot of money being printed and that stocks are not a bad place to put it if you want to beat treasuries. Anything that lasts long term wins the hearts and minds of the young. How many young people talk about gold, real estate, or even stocks? Bitcoin has already won. It'll just take time for the future to catch up. So from an investment perspective, this is something that's going to last. Young people are especially prone to, see things about Bitcoin that a lot of older people just simply can't grasp. Opportunity is everywhere. You just have to train yourself to spot it. Luck is a good opportunity being taken. Bitcoin is an obvious opportunity. If you don't see the opportunity yet, take your time. It'll be here when you're done learning. So a lot of people have trouble seeing the opportunity in Bitcoin, and that means you probably need to study it a little better. It's still early. You don't need to get in right now. Go learn about Bitcoin first is essentially the message. Why would the Fed want negative rates? Central bank fiat money is debt, and they can't print more if no one wants to borrow. Negative rates spur more money printing through borrowing, which inevitably goes to big corps and rich people. Sick of this? Bitcoin is secure. Now, this is different than sort of like the 6-month treasury going negative or something like that. It's the Fed lowering the discount window to negative because they really need people to borrow. And if you have negative rates, then people are incentivized to borrow because you pay back less than you're taking out in loans. So, that I think that's coming because the dollar liquidity crisis in the world is just absolutely insane. They need to print more money. Otherwise, all these emerging economies are going to completely collapse. So, I think negative rates are coming. And when that happens, I think, essentially you're going to get a lot more people borrowing and print a lot more money. In 16 days, Bitcoin will become the hardest decentralized commodity to ever exist. Excited yet? This is in reference to, of course, the stock to flow ratio and the fact that, we're going to have a better stock to flow than gold once the halvening happens. So that happens in 14 days from now, and we can always take a look at Bitcoin halving. Whoops. Countdown. Yeah, so I think this website, 14 days, 15 hours, 50 minutes. So this will correct itself as more blocks are found or less blocks are found. So most people seem to think that a new all-time high in Bitcoin will happen sometime between January of 2021 and December of 2021. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a terrible estimate at all. Reading the news and understanding how something works are not the same thing. To hodl through the next wave, learn Bitcoin at a deeper level, deeper than the price. So most people just sort of know it at the price level. You need to know it at a deeper level. Because like news is very shallow. Learning something deeply, that's where the real juice is. Unfortunately, most people read the news and just get influenced by the emotions of it or the propaganda value of the news rather than the actual informative value. And there's not that much informative value in the first place. Most of the information comes from like actually understanding how something works. So what I'm asking you guys to do is to understand it at a deeper level so you're not so influenced by the propaganda in the news. And that's how you sort of immunize yourself. All right, so those are the tweets. Let's do our long read. This is How to Protect Your Bitcoin from $5 Wrench Attacks by Jameson Lopp. Any seasoned Bitcoin user is familiar with the famous X expended in a matter of minutes, so can a robber armed with a $5 wrench. The price for convenience is risk. And this is absolutely correct, right? Like convenience and security don't normally go together very well. This is not merely a theoretical scenario. I have cataloged over 50 physical attacks against Bitcoin users, including myself. The only way to guard against coercion is to ensure that you don't have immediate access to cold storage funds. Casa mitigates this threat and many more as explained in our Wealth Security Protocol. There's no silver bullet for addressing this issue. Rather, you'll want multiple layers of protection. First, practice strong privacy, so you're not the subject of an attack in the first place. Of the known documented physical attacks, around 80% of them were successful. Second, make an attack costly and difficult to execute. You can do this by securing your funds with a multi-signature scheme, separating your keys, and implementing strong physical security, digital security, and security processes. Privacy. The more loudly you proclaim that you're holding Bitcoin, the larger a target you make for yourself. While on the one hand, I don't think you should go so far as to avoid ever discussing Bitcoin with friends and family, neither do you need to announce it to every random stranger who sees you in public. Like I once did. I drove a flashy car for several years with Bitcoin license plate, and while it only ever resulted in sparking conversations, it was a risk for me to do so. Oh, yeah, he did. He had a Bitcoin license plate. The stronger your privacy, the harder it will be for an attacker to find you. You can't attack what you can't find. For an in-depth privacy primer, check out my guide here. So essentially, privacy is sort of your first layer of security. If people don't know that you have the Bitcoin, then you know that will get you like 80-90% of the way there. Physical security. The simplest way to immensely improve your resistance to physical attack is via geographic separation of keys into a multi-signature setup. Each key should then have its own set of security controls that limit physical access. For a comprehensive guide to physical security, check out my article here. So this is making sure that wherever the keys are has the right physical security around it, and there's a security procedure for each location and so on. There are several reasons why this geographic separation is important. Time. The longer it takes to complete an attack, the more likely the attacker will get caught. Thus, the greater incentive for someone to attempt an attack. Greater disincentive for someone to attempt an attack. Increased physical risk to attackers. There's a huge difference in risk between an in and out home invasion versus having to kidnap someone and ferry them around to multiple locations without arousing suspicion. Privacy. If you store keys in non-obvious locations, it's not possible for an attacker to simultaneously compromise multiple keys. First, they need to coerce you into revealing the locations, which puts a huge roadblock to planning out a complex operation beforehand without the knowledge of the security protecting each key. Limited access hours. By keeping devices in locations that are only open during business hours, you limit the effectiveness of nighttime attacks. So essentially, these are the good properties of physically separating them and having different protocols for each one. But of course, every one of these makes it like way more inconvenient, and that's kind of the point, is that it is going to be very inconvenient. The final layers of physical security should be a dedicated hardware device. This is another reason why we advise our users against keeping clear text backups of their seeds, phrases on paper, metal, etc. If an attacker manages to breach your layers of standard physical security, you don't want them to be able to simply walk off with your seed phrase. Hardware devices enable you to protect them with a numeric PIN. These provide an essential layer of security against theft, so that physical possession of the hardware is not enough to access the private keys inside. Hardware devices wipe themselves after a certain number of incorrect PIN guesses, protecting against an attacker brute forcing the PIN. So by securing your private keys in a cold card ledger Trezor, you can have a high degree of confidence that an attacker won't be able to track the keys. While there is a known exploit that can be used against Trezor devices, it requires a fair amount of sophistication to pull off. I wouldn't rely on that necessarily, but he is right that at least having it on a physical device makes it a lot harder than on a piece of paper. The goal is not to make every component of your key setup perfectly secure against an adversary with unlimited resources. The goal is to make it difficult enough that no attacker can compromise a sufficient threshold of your keys quickly enough that nobody notices until it's too late to react. So you have mitigation in case you know that attack is happening. By spacing it out across time, you can what's going on, or you can execute those mitigations. Digital security. If a physical attacker manages to start collecting your private keys, red button, the emergency lockdown feature. This feature is available to our premium users and essentially turns off access to your wallet for coordinating transaction signatures. It also logs you out of the Casa app and prevents the mobile key from being accessed. While it's still possible to construct a transaction using your other devices and non-Casa software, it becomes much more onerous to do so. So you can still, this is a Casa solution. You have like a big red button that basically locks everyone out of everything and gives you a window of time to do something about like an attack in progress. Another digital option is to make funds unspendable, which is more technically complicated, is to time lock the coins. This ensures that no one can move those funds, even if all the keys to do so have been compromised. However, this introduces new complexities and thus potential for failure and loss. I discussed the trade-offs in this post. Time locking doesn't give you the same protections that slowing down an attacker does. As stated earlier, the goal should be for you to be able to spend your coins and move them to a new setup before the attacker is able to spend them. It's a race for control. However, consider a scenario in which an attacker is compromising your keys. Even if you know your setup is being attacked, you can't move your coins to a new key set until date X. You've effectively given the attacker until date X to continue their attack and collect more keys. You'll end up in one of three scenarios. The attacker doesn't have enough keys, so you move your funds. Neither you nor the attacker have enough keys, so you're in a stalemate and have to negotiate a ransom by sending partially signed transactions back and forth. Both you and the attacker have enough keys. You know that this means you'll both start broadcasting replaced by fee transactions to spend the coins as soon as the network allows it, effectively creating a race to the bottom of who is willing to burn the most money on transaction fees. As such, you're incentivized to negotiate a compromise payoff by sending partially signed transactions back and forth instead of racing to the bottom. So this is a little bit down the game theory rabbit hole here, but basically, depending on who has more keys, assuming perfectly Nietzschean, like will to power miners or something like that, this is the scenario that you get. I think an actual scenario would be a little bit different. You can contact a lot of the mining pools beforehand and sort of prove your identity to them before date X and get them to mine the transaction that you've already created for them and have them reject anything else and use replace by fee or something else as a way to get your money back. But yeah, I mean, there are mitigations like that you can do. That I don't think it would be like quite this drastic. Security processes. If you have keys held by friends, family, or professional third parties, then it's important to institute processes that those key holders will enforce. We recommend implementing challenge response phrases as soft authentication, duress responses that are not obvious duress phrases. The video conference requirement, deepfakes are still challenging to pull off against non-famous targets. Mandatory multi-day waiting period between authentication and signing. These are the types of measures that are used to safeguard the CASA recovery key from being used to sign a transaction for a user who's being covered. So, having a duress response is a really good idea. So most of these collaborative custody services have some sort of video chat thing before you unlock funds. So you call them and they show whatever, and they ask you some questions, and there's a challenge and response. If they receive a word that's like kind of your panic word but isn't obvious, a duress word or something like that, then they lock everything down, and that's a really clever way to sort of like shortcut like any sort of kidnapping attempt or a way to get money out with like under duress. The idea, duress decoy wallets. The idea here is plausible deniability. People envision the following scenario. Attacker coerces you into accessing your Bitcoin wallet under threat of violence. Instead of opening your real Bitcoin wallet, you open one with a much smaller amount of money in it. You transfer it to the attacker and they leave satisfied. There are several issues with duress wallets. You are speculating that the amount in your decoy wallet is plausibly large enough to satisfy an attacker whose knowledge and motivations you have no way of knowing. You are speculating about the attacker's propensity for violence. For all you know, their plan all along may be to leave no witnesses alive. How far do you take the ruse with the decoy wallet? Do you transact regularly from it so that it looks like a wallet that is actually used rather than a dormant decoy? Will an attacker be sophisticated enough to be suspicious of a decoy wallet with no activity? You can't realistically test how you will react in such a situation. We've yet to hear of a single case in which a victim successfully managed to get an attacker to go away by giving up a decoy wallet, though there haven't been a ton of publicized physical attacks yet. We need more data. Known failed attacks. While we should learn from our mistakes, it's preferable to learn from other people's mistakes. Unfortunately, in the vast majority of known physical attacks, the perpetrators were successful in coercing the victims to transfer their money. When did attackers fail? A man in Norway escaped the home invader by jumping off a second floor balcony. A Dutch trader endured horrific torture without giving up his private keys. It's unclear as to whether or not he was capable of transferring his funds to them. There is only a single case in which a Bitcoiner has successfully defended themselves against a physical attacker. A Miami man who was carrying a handgun shot his attacker. In summary, wrench attacks are disturbing to think about, but it's important to maintain perspective. The amount of Bitcoin lost to in-person attacks is orders of magnitude less than the amount of coins lost to hacks of the exchanges and other trusted third parties. By knowing the risks, we can design a system that mitigates them. The ability to slow down attackers by requiring multiple authorizations via a diversity of hardware, software, and physical locations results in a level of security that is arguably greater than that of a traditional bank vault. All right, so stay safe. So that's our read. Essentially, he's saying like having some sort of mitigation or a well-planned execution path for like theft from a $5 wrench attack requires a lot of planning. Unfortunately, if it's the state that's trying to get at the money, that's a whole other level of security that or a different level of considerations, and that's something I think that they're working on. But I asked them a while ago, well, okay, if you have a 6 key, then can't your lawyer, CASA, and the bank collaborate to take away your money and give it to the government? So depending on what threats you're defending against, it's going to be kind of a trade-off. So that's something definitely to think about. All right, one last thing. If you are interested in reading about Bitcoin, I have 2 books available. The Little Bitcoin book, which is available on Amazon on Kindle audiobook and paperback, Spanish and Portuguese. It's for pre-coiners. And finally, the Programming Bitcoin, which is available from O'Reilly and is available Wow, you can rent it for $11.30, or you can buy it for $41.27. But it's available from O'Reilly if you want to learn about Bitcoin and some Python. This is the book to get. All right, that's about it for me. Our cloud password apps like LastPass, Unsafe. I mean, to some degree, it's better than like using the same password everywhere. Like that's for certain. I don't. It depends on like what you're securing. If you're securing your Bitcoin, no, it's not good enough. If you're securing access to a forum where there's no actual money involved, I mean that might be okay enough. All right. So anyway, hope you guys are having a good day. And Fiat Delenda Est. This song is done.